The house was eerily quiet as Anna stood frozen in the hallway, the phone in her hand, trembling. She had just heard the conversation that would forever shatter her life. Her partner, Daniel, the man she had trusted with everything, had confessed to an affair, not just with anyone, but with her own sister, Emily. The words rang in her ears as her heart sank. "It just happened," Daniel had said. "It was a mistake." But to Anna, it wasn't just a mistake, it was betrayal, a violation of every sacred trust they'd built together. How could Emily, her sister, someone she had loved and protected all these years, do this to her? The revelation felt like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. Her hands were clammy, her mind racing, trying to piece together what had led to this moment. She had noticed the subtle changes in Daniel, the distant looks, the late nights, but she had pushed them aside, telling herself it was just stress from work. Now, as the truth unfolded, everything made sense in the worst possible way. She thought of her sister, who had always been her confidante, her ally. How long had this been going on? The emotions swirled inside her. Anger, hurt, disbelief, and something darker. Revenge. Her heart screamed for answers, but there were none. In the distance, she heard a car door slam, and her stomach twisted. Daniel was home. He had no idea that the world he knew was about to unravel. Anna stood there, her mind spinning. She couldn't comprehend how everything had come crashing down so quickly. Her eyes flickered towards the door as she heard Daniel moving around in the living room, unaware of the emotional earthquake his actions had triggered. Her hands were still shaking, the phone clutched tightly in her grasp. She hadn't prepared for this. She had always known there were cracks in their relationship, but she never expected this. She never expected her sister, her own flesh and blood, to be the one who would betray her. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Daniel had done. How could Emily, who had always stood by her, the one she had trusted more than anyone, do this? And why? What had she hoped to gain? Anna's thoughts spiraled, her chest tightening as the suffocating weight of the situation took hold. Her sister and Daniel had crossed a line, and Anna didn't know if she could ever look at either of them the same way again. She closed her eyes, hoping to calm her racing heart, but the image of her sister and Daniel together kept flashing before her eyes. The emotional pain was almost too much to bear. Anna could feel the heat of her anger building up. She had always been the calm one, the one who kept everything together. But in this moment, she felt as if everything was unraveling. The betrayal, the lies, the deceit, it was all too much. She wanted to scream, to shout at both Daniel and Emily for what they had done. But instead she stood frozen, paralyzed by the weight of the moment. She had loved Daniel for years, built a life with him, shared dreams, hopes, and plans. And Emily, her sister, her confidante, the person she thought would always have her back. How could she betray her like this? Anna's heart felt as though it were breaking, a jagged fracture slicing through her chest. She could hear Daniel moving around in the living room, oblivious to the emotional storm he had set in motion. He was so sure of himself, so confident in his manipulation, but Anna wasn't fooled anymore. The guilt in his eyes when he confessed had been too much to ignore. He knew he had crossed a line. But the pain of his betrayal wasn't just in the act itself. It was in the deception, the lies, and the utter disregard for Anna's heart. Anna paced back and forth, her mind trying to make sense of the broken pieces in her life. She couldn't even look at her phone anymore. The message from her sister haunted her. Emily's apology seemed hollow, like a desperate attempt to justify her actions. How could someone so close to her hurt her so deeply? As the seconds ticked by, Anna knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She had to confront them, had to hear the truth from their mouths, but she dreaded what she might learn. Her hands tightened into fists as her body trembled with suppressed emotion. The only thing she was certain of now was that nothing in her life would ever be as simple as it had been before. The door creaked open behind her, and Anna froze. It was Daniel. He was standing there, his expression unreadable as he gazed at her. His usual confident demeanor had faltered slightly, but Anna wasn't sure if that was due to guilt or fear. She could see him trying to gauge her reaction, but there was nothing left for him to read in her eyes. She had been transparent with him once, but now, everything about her felt foreign, hidden behind a veil of hurt and betrayal. He stepped into the room slowly, his footsteps tentative, but Anna didn't move. She was done running, done pretending that everything was fine. "Anna," Daniel started, his voice low, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." The words felt hollow. They were just more of the same excuses, more of the same lies. Anna's chest tightened at the sound of his voice. So familiar, so used to comforting her. Now it only stirred the anger within her. Anna took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't sure what to say, or where to begin. The hurt was so raw, so fresh. But she had to say something, anything, to make him understand the depths of his betrayal. "Talk," she echoed coldly, her voice trembling with controlled emotion. "You think I want to talk to you? After everything?" She turned to face him, her eyes hard, her lips pressed together tightly. The pain in her chest made it almost impossible to breathe, but she had to get through this. "You cheated on me, with my sister, and now you want to talk?" Her words were sharp, like daggers, and Daniel recoiled slightly, as if each word was a physical blow. His mouth opened as if he was about to say something, probably another excuse, but Anna held up her hand to stop him. She didn't need to hear his lies anymore. The tension between them grew thick, suffocating. Anna's mind raced, but she couldn't find the words to fully articulate the whirlwind of emotions she was feeling. All she could do was stare at Daniel, her eyes burning with unshed tears. How had it come to this? How had the man she loved, the man she thought she would spend her life with, turned into a stranger? The silence stretched on, making Anna's anger simmer beneath the surface. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Anna, I never meant for it to happen like this," he said, the words hanging in the air. "I didn't want to hurt you. I love you." But it wasn't love that Anna felt anymore. It was betrayal. Deep, agonizing betrayal. How could he stand there and tell her he loved her, when the evidence of his actions screamed the opposite? "Love?" she scoffed, shaking her head. "You don't love me, Daniel. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. If you loved me, you wouldn't have torn apart everything we built together." Her voice was steady now, fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak. She had never been this certain about anything in her life. "I don't know who you are anymore." She turned away from him, her back to him, but he stepped forward, reaching out. "Please, Anna, don't do this. I need you." His plea was desperate, but it only made Anna's heart ache more. She couldn't listen to him anymore. "No," she whispered, a finality in her voice. "I need to be alone." Without waiting for him to respond, she walked into the living room, leaving Daniel standing in the hallway, his face contorted with guilt and regret. Anna sat in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of the betrayal still hanging heavy in the air. It had been days since Daniel's confession, and though the immediate shock had worn off, the pain had not. She had spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the conversations, the moments that led up to this. Her once happy home now felt like a prison, each creak of the floorboards reminding her of the lies that had been told. She had tried to distract herself, going to work, seeing friends, but it all felt meaningless. The world outside had moved on, but Anna's life had been frozen in a moment of heartbreak. Her mind kept circling back to one question. Why? Why her sister? Why Daniel? It wasn't just the affair. It was the sheer disrespect they had shown her, the trust they had broken. She couldn't understand how they both had been so careless, so indifferent to the devastation they were causing. What made it even harder was the nagging voice in her head that kept telling her to forgive them, to move past it. But every time she thought of doing that, the anger would return, sharper than before. There was no turning back, no easy way out. She knew she had to face the truth of what had happened, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for what that truth would reveal. The days blurred into one another, as Anna's routine remained unchanged, but the underlying tension was always present. One evening, as she walked through the door, she noticed a familiar sight that made her stomach drop. Her sister Emily's car was parked outside. The last time Emily had come over, they'd barely spoken. The anger between them had been palpable, but Anna couldn't avoid the inevitable conversation forever. She could hear the muffled sound of Emily's voice from inside the apartment. It was soft at first, but then the words became more distinct. "Anna, I know you're angry, but you have to understand it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant to hurt you." Emily's voice trailed off, but the hurt and desperation were clear. Anna stood frozen at the door for a moment, conflicted. Part of her wanted to turn around, to leave before the confrontation could happen, but the other part of her knew she couldn't run anymore. She had to face this for herself, for the closure she so desperately needed. Slowly, she stepped inside. "Emily," Anna said quietly, her voice breaking the silence that had hung heavy in the room. Emily immediately turned, her face filled with remorse. She stood up quickly as if to reach out, but Anna held up her hand, stopping her. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't touch me." Emily's face crumbled, her lips trembling as she nodded, stepping back. Anna's heart ached at the sight, but she couldn't let her sister's tears soften her resolve. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want excuses," Anna continued, her voice growing firmer. "I want to know why. Why you did this to me." Her eyes were locked onto Emily's, searching for answers. Emily looked down, unable to meet her sister's gaze. "I never wanted to hurt you, Anna, but She stopped, swallowing the words that seemed stuck in her throat. "I was confused. I never meant for it to go this far, but it just happened." Anna shook her head, unable to comprehend the depth of the betrayal. How could Emily, of all people, justify this? "Confused," Anna echoed, her voice dripping with disbelief. "How could you sleep with my fiancé? How could you look me in the eye every day and pretend everything was normal?" Anna felt the anger rising inside her as Emily's words seemed to fall flat. There was no understanding in Emily's eyes, no true remorse, just an endless series of justifications. "I don't know what to say, Anna. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I never wanted to hurt you." Emily's voice cracked as she spoke, but it only fueled Anna's fury. "You say you never wanted to hurt me, but here we are, and everything is destroyed. You think I'm supposed to just accept that?" Anna's words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but Anna didn't want to see them. She had cried enough for both of them. "How could you do this to me?" Anna whispered again, her voice raw. "How could you take something so sacred and twist it like this?" Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stepped forward, but Anna immediately took a step back, her body tense. Don't come near me," she warned, her voice firm and trembling. Emily nodded silently, her face crumpling as she finally realized that there was no way to fix this, no way to undo the damage. "I can't do this," Anna finally said, her voice low and breaking. "I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. I can't pretend you didn't betray me." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle around them like a thick fog. The tears she had been holding back threatened to spill over, but she fought them back, determined to remain strong. "You've crossed a line that can't be undone. And no matter how sorry you are, it won't fix what you've done." Emily's face crumpled further as she looked at Anna, but Anna wasn't done yet. "You can't come into my life anymore, Emily. Not like this. Not after what you did." There was a finality in Anna's voice, a tone that left no room for discussion. Emily opened her mouth, but Anna held up her hand. "I don't want to hear it. I need time away from both of you." Emily nodded, her tears falling freely now. Anna didn't look back as she turned and walked away, the sound of Emily's sobs echoing in the room behind her. The days after Anna's confrontation with Emily were filled with silence and isolation. Her once bustling apartment had become a tomb, a place where memories of betrayal haunted every corner. But even in the midst of her pain, something deeper began to gnaw at her. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's confession. The way he had spoken, the way he had seemed so guilty yet so distant, it all seemed too rehearsed, too controlled. It was as if he was hiding something more, something bigger than the affair itself. As the days passed, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, a dark secret that he hadn't revealed. She began to dig deeper, going through their shared files on their computer, their phone records, anything that could give her more answers. And then, one night, after hours of searching, she found it. A file, buried deep within their shared documents labeled Project Genesis. Her heart raced as she clicked on the file. The first few pages were innocuous, talk about work, meetings, deadlines. But as she scrolled further, the tone began to shift. There were notes, cryptic and troubling, about their relationship, about the affair, but also about manipulation, control, and a planned deceit that went far beyond anything Anna had imagined. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Was Daniel orchestrating everything? Was Emily just a pawn in his game? The truth began to unravel before her eyes, and with it, the realization that this wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. The words on the screen were like a punch to the gut. Anna could barely comprehend what she was reading. The file described not only the affair with Emily, but detailed how Daniel had planned to manipulate Anna into staying with him, despite his infidelity. He had created a facade of love, used her trust, and built their life together as a form of control. It was all part of his plan, a calculated attempt to keep her in a toxic, dependent relationship. But that wasn't all. The document also contained information about Emily's involvement. Emily wasn't just an innocent victim of Daniel's charms. She had been complicit in the scheme, aware of Daniel's manipulations and playing her part in the deception. The realization hit Anna like a freight train. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. Daniel had used both of them, setting them up against each other to maintain power and control. She felt the floor beneath her give way, the weight of the betrayal growing heavier with each passing second. She had always believed in the honesty of their relationship, but now she saw it for what it truly was. A lie. And Emily, her own sister, had been a willing accomplice. The room felt suffocating as Anna sat back in her chair, the file still open in front of her. Her mind raced, the thoughts crashing together in a whirlwind of confusion and anger. How had she been so blind? How had she allowed herself to be manipulated for so long? She thought of the early days of her relationship with Daniel, the way he had swept her off her feet, the promises of forever. It all seemed so perfect, so genuine. But now, she realized, it had all been part of a much darker plan. Her entire life had been carefully orchestrated, with her as the unwitting pawn. The betrayal stung in ways she couldn't fully describe, but the anger that followed was like a fire burning through her veins. She thought of her sister, of Emily, and the trust that had been broken. Emily hadn't just betrayed her. She had helped Daniel tear apart their lives, all for the sake of his power. The realization that they had been playing a game, manipulating her emotions and her trust, made Anna sick to her stomach. She needed answers. She needed to confront them both, together. Anna's hands shook as she typed the message. She couldn't hold the anger in anymore. It was time for the confrontation. She had already confronted Emily alone, but now she needed to confront Daniel and Emily together. She was done being the victim in their game. The message was simple. I know everything. Meet me at 7 p.m. We need to talk. As soon as she sent it, a strange calm washed over her. The anticipation of finally getting the truth, the closure she had desperately needed, filled her with a strange sense of power. She wasn't the naive woman she had been a week ago. She had learned the truth, and now she would hold both Daniel and Emily accountable for the lies they had told her. The clock seemed to tick louder as she waited for their responses. When the time came, she would face them, head on, and make them answer for everything they had done. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The clock struck 7 p.m., and Anna stood by the window, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt more alive, more in control of her own destiny. The sound of footsteps outside her door made her breath catch in her throat. Daniel and Emily had arrived. She had asked them to meet her here, in her home, where everything had started, and now everything would come to an end. She could hear their voices as they stood outside, hesitant but still determined. They were trying to prepare themselves for the confrontation, but nothing could prepare them for what was about to happen. Anna opened the door, And there they were, Daniel and Emily, standing together, both looking guilty, but also strangely defiant. The tension between them was palpable. "You both have a lot to answer for," Anna said, her voice steady, her eyes burning with the intensity of her anger and determination. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing for certain: they would not walk away from this unscathed. The silence in the room was deafening. Anna stood with her arms crossed, her eyes burning into Daniel and Emily, who stood facing her. The time for explanations, apologies, and excuses had passed. There was no more room for forgiveness, not after everything they had done. "I've heard enough of your lies," Anna said, her voice sharp, cutting through the thick silence. "It's time you both face the truth. This wasn't just an affair, it was a scheme, a plan to tear me apart and keep me under control. Daniel, you manipulated everything. My trust, my love, my life. And you, Emily, you were supposed to be my sister, my ally. But you were just another player in his game." She could see the guilt on both their faces, but it was too little, too late. "I trusted you both, and you used me. You didn't care about me, you only cared about yourselves, about maintaining your control over me." Anna's voice cracked slightly as the weight of her words settled in, but her determination was unwavering. "I'm done being a pawn in your game. I won't be your victim anymore. You've already taken too much from me. This ends tonight." Her words hung in the air, thick with the finality of everything she had endured. There was no turning back now. The truth had been exposed, and now she had the strength to face the consequences. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his expression faltering as Anna's words cut through him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He knew there was no excuse for his actions, no way to undo the damage he had done. His gaze flickered to Emily, who stood silently beside him, her face pale and filled with regret. Emily's voice broke the silence, soft and shaky. "Anna, please, I never meant for it to go this far," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I was confused. I didn't want to hurt you, I don't know what happened." Her voice trailed off, unable to justify her actions. Anna's eyes narrowed as she listened to Emily's weak apology. She had heard enough excuses. "You don't get to be sorry now," Anna replied coldly. "You chose to betray me. You chose to help him destroy my trust. I don't want your apologies. I want accountability." Emily opened her mouth again, but Anna cut her off. "No more words. You had your chance to be honest. You both chose this, and now you have to live with the consequences." Her voice was steady, but the bitterness in her words was clear. Anna's gaze shifted from Emily to Daniel. "And as for you, Daniel, you can't just walk away from this. You don't get to pretend like you're the victim here." Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and filled with regret. "I never meant to hurt you, Anna," he said, his words carrying a hint of desperation. "I was stupid, and I made a mistake, but I never meant to destroy everything. I love you. I just got lost along the way." Anna scoffed at his words, her anger rising again. "Love? Is that what this is? Manipulating me for your own gain? You don't get to claim love when you've treated me like this. You didn't just cheat on me. You tried to control my every move, my every thought. You thought you could break me and make me dependent on you. But you were wrong." Anna took a step closer to him, her voice rising in intensity. "You were so convinced you could manipulate me into staying, so sure that you could erase everything we had with your lies. But you didn't count on me. You didn't count on me finding the truth." Her eyes were cold as she looked at Daniel, finally seeing him for who he truly was. "You're not the man I thought you were. And Emily," she turned to her sister, "you're not the sister I thought I had." The room felt suffocating as Anna's words filled the air, the emotional weight of her confrontation pressing down on them all. Emily, her voice barely a whisper, finally spoke. "I never meant to hurt you, Anna. I was weak and I got caught up in something I didn't understand. I'm so sorry." Her words felt hollow, empty in the face of Anna's unrelenting anger. Anna's heart ached, but the pain quickly shifted to fury. "Sorry?" Anna repeated, her voice trembling with rage. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You had a choice, Emily. You chose to betray me. You chose to hurt me. You're not sorry you got caught. Emily flinched at Anna's words, but there was no turning back. I can't forgive you, Anna said, her voice steady. And I don't think I ever will. The finality in her words hung in the air like a sentence, one that would change everything between them. The silence that followed was suffocating, as the truth of Anna's words sank in. There was no redemption for Emily, not today. And there was no turning back for Anna. The emotional weight of everything she had endured over the past few days felt like a heavy burden she had finally laid down. The confrontation was over, and yet it had only just begun. Daniel's silence was deafening. He stood there, his head lowered, unable to meet Anna's gaze. What do you want from me? He finally asked, his voice breaking. What can I do to make this right? Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with contempt. You can't make this right, she said coldly. The damage is done. You've lost me, Daniel. You'll never have me again. Her words were like a dagger, but they were necessary. She had to say them, for her own sanity, for her own healing. I don't need you. I don't need any of this. I'm done. With those final words, Anna turned her back on them, walking toward the door. The sound of their footsteps behind her was distant, irrelevant. She had made her decision, and nothing could change it now. She opened the door, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the handle. Leave, she said without turning back. It's over. Anna had always prided herself on being strong, on holding everything together despite the chaos around her. But in the aftermath of the confrontation, she felt lost. The pain from the betrayal still clung to her like a shadow, but there was something else, something deeper, that began to surface. The sense of loss. Not just for Daniel or Emily, but for the woman she had been before everything had crumbled. Who was she now, and what was she supposed to do with all this brokenness? Anna sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty space where Daniel used to sleep. Her mind replayed the good moments, the laughter, the closeness, the love they had shared. But now it all felt like a distant memory, a dream that had turned into a nightmare. For the first time in a long time, Anna allowed herself to cry. The tears were hot and unstoppable, each one a release of the grief that had built up over the past weeks. But even as she wept, she knew something had shifted within her. The anger was no longer the driving force. Now it was a sense of clarity. She had been broken, but she was no longer lost. She was reclaiming herself, piece by piece. The journey was far from over, but Anna finally felt the first glimmer of hope. She could move forward. She would survive this. The next few days were a blur of movement, of putting one foot in front of the other, but Anna could feel herself slowly regaining control of her life. She spent time with friends who had always been there for her, and in their company, she began to rediscover parts of herself that she had forgotten. She started going to the gym again, something she hadn't done in months. It wasn't about looking good for anyone but herself. It was about reclaiming her strength, both physically and mentally. Every drop of sweat, every painful step on the treadmill, was a reminder that she was capable of healing. At work, Anna threw herself into her projects with a renewed focus. She found satisfaction in her accomplishments, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, she could breathe without the weight of Daniel's betrayal crushing her chest. Slowly, the fog of confusion began to lift, and she could see a future that wasn't defined by her past. She didn't need Daniel or Emily to complete her. She was whole, even if it didn't feel that way at the moment. But she was learning to believe in herself again. She was learning that she was enough. A week later, Anna sat at a cafe with her best friend, sipping coffee and laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. It was a small, intimate moment, but it held so much meaning. Anna realized that her journey wasn't just about healing from the betrayal. It was about rediscovering who she was without the influence of toxic relationships. Her friend looked at her with a smile, noticing the change. "You look different," she remarked, her voice filled with admiration. Anna smiled softly. "I feel different," she replied, her voice steady and filled with the strength she had been slowly rebuilding. She had faced the darkness, confronted the truth, and now she was walking in the light. "I'm starting to see things more clearly," Anna continued. "I don't need to be defined by the past. I'm more than the pain I've experienced. I'm moving forward." Her friend reached across the table, squeezing her hand in support. Anna looked out the window, watching the world go by, feeling a quiet peace settle in her heart. She was no longer the woman she had been. She had grown, evolved, and now it was time for her to embrace her future. Anna stood in front of her apartment building, the weight of the past finally starting to lift. She had moved her things out of the space she had once shared with Daniel, and as she looked up at the building, she felt a mixture of relief and sadness. It wasn't just the physical move. It was the emotional release that came with it. She had let go of the past, but the memories still lingered, like ghosts in the corners of her mind. But she wasn't afraid anymore. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her friend. "Just wanted to remind you, you're stronger than you think. Keep going." Anna smiled, a small knowing smile that was filled with gratitude. She wasn't there yet, but she was closer than ever. She had learned that true strength didn't come from avoiding pain. It came from embracing it and finding the courage to move forward despite it. Anna looked back at the apartment building one last time, then turned away, ready to take the next step. Her life was hers again, and this time, she was in control. As Anna walked through the city, the hustle and bustle of life around her felt different. For the first time, she wasn't just moving through the motions, she was living. The weight of the past was no longer holding her back, and she walked with a newfound confidence. The world around her seemed brighter, more colorful, as if she were seeing it through new eyes. She didn't need anyone else's approval. She didn't need to be loved by anyone but herself. The journey to self-love wasn't easy, but it had been worth it. She had fought for herself, and now she was standing tall. As she passed a mirror in a store window, she stopped and looked at her reflection. For the first time in a long time, she saw the woman she had become. Strong, independent, and free. Anna smiled softly to herself, knowing that no matter what came next, she would be okay. She was ready for whatever the future held, because she knew she had the strength to face it. The world was hers for the taking. The weeks following Anna's emotional confrontation with Daniel and Emily were some of the most challenging of her life. Yet in that chaos, she found clarity. It had been hard, the kind of pain that felt like a weight in her chest, suffocating her every breath. But amidst it all, something inside her shifted. The anger began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of self-worth. Anna had spent too long letting others define her, letting her past control her future. Now, she was taking control back, piece by piece. She didn't need Daniel's apology, nor Emily's regret. She didn't need them to make her feel whole again. What she needed, she realized, was to find peace within herself. The thought that once seemed impossible now felt like the only way forward. She began going to therapy, working through the mess of emotions that had tangled up inside her. Each session left her feeling lighter, more capable of healing. She also made an effort to reconnect with her passions, diving into creative projects she had neglected for years. The old Anna was starting to resurface, the one who lived for herself, not for anyone else. Every day felt like a victory, and for the first time in a long time she could see the light ahead. It wasn't easy, but Anna had found the strength to build a future without fear. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and crafted something new. Anna spent the next few months taking care of herself in ways she had never done before. She joined a community group that shared her love for painting, a hobby she had put on the back burner for far too long. Each brushstroke was a moment of release, a reminder of the joy that had once been so prevalent in her life. But now, it carried a deeper meaning. Each painting was a symbol of her personal growth, a testament to her resilience. She painted in colors she had never dared to use before, bold and vibrant hues that reflected the woman she was becoming. As Anna stood in front of her latest creation, a large canvas filled with swirling reds and blues, she felt a deep sense of pride. This was more than just art. This was therapy, a way to channel her pain into something beautiful. The people she had once loved, who had once held such power over her, now seemed distant. They were no longer part of her story. She had made sure of that. As Anna stepped back and admired her work, she realized that she was starting to trust herself again. She was learning to love herself for who she was, not for who others thought she should be. It wasn't until Anna bumped into Daniel on the street one afternoon that she realized how far she had come. Their meeting was purely coincidental, but it felt like fate. She was walking briskly down the sidewalk, lost in her thoughts, when she heard his voice call her name. "Anna," Daniel said, his tone unsure, almost hesitant. He stood before her, looking much the same as he always had, but now Anna saw him for who he truly was. A man who had hurt her. A man who was no longer a part of her life. She took a deep breath and turned to face him. Her heart didn't race like it used to. There was no anger, no desire for revenge. Instead, there was only a quiet resolve, a sense of peace that settled over her. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Daniel started, his voice low. Anna interrupted him. "I'm not angry anymore," she said firmly. "I'm not looking for an apology, Daniel. I'm moving on." His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to say that. Anna's voice softened, but her gaze remained strong. "I don't need you to apologize. I've forgiven you. But I'm not the same woman I was when I loved you. I'm different now, and I'm okay with that." The truth of her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Anna realized that she had truly let go. Later that evening, Anna found herself sitting on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city below. The night was quiet, the soft hum of traffic, distant and peaceful. She had taken the steps she needed to move on, but part of her still felt uncertain. Could she truly let go of the past? Could she fully embrace the new life she was building? As she thought about it, Anna realized that the uncertainty was natural. Healing wasn't a straight line, and the journey was never over. But she had come so far, and she was proud of the woman she had become. She had rebuilt herself, stronger than she ever thought possible. And now, she could look at her past with a sense of gratitude, not because the pain had been easy, but because it had taught her the value of her own strength. Anna stood up and stretched, feeling the cool evening air on her skin. She wasn't where she wanted to be yet, but she was on the right path. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but it was hers to walk. Months passed, and Anna's life continued to unfold, each day bringing with it new opportunities and challenges. She had found peace in her own company, in her own strength. The woman who once defined herself by her relationships was now learning to define herself on her own terms. She found joy in the small things, the feeling of the sun on her face during morning walks, the comfort of her favorite book, the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. And one day, as she sat at a cafe with a friend, laughing and enjoying the simplicity of life, Anna realized something important. She was no longer the woman shaped by the pain of betrayal. She was someone new, someone whole. She had learned to trust herself, to love herself, and to embrace the life she was creating. And as she looked around at the people in her life, those who had supported her along the way, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her past no longer had a hold on her. It had become a part of her story, but not her identity. She had let go, and in doing so, she had found freedom. Anna stood on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the city lights below. It had been months since she had made the decision to leave her old life behind, and now, standing here in this new chapter, she could finally breathe. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the anger, had begun to fade, leaving only the lessons she had learned. She had rediscovered her own strength, her ability to stand on her own 2 feet without relying on anyone else. The healing process had been slow, but it had been necessary. Each day had been a step toward reclaiming herself, toward building a life she could be proud of. As she looked out at the city skyline, Anna felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. She had come a long way, from a woman who had been shattered by betrayal to one who now stood tall, unafraid of the future. It wasn't about revenge, or even about forgiveness. It was about accepting what had happened, letting it go, and choosing to move forward. Anna's life was hers again, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. One evening, Anna received a message from her old friend, someone she had shared countless moments with before everything had fallen apart. The message was simple, just a checking-in text, but as she read it, Anna couldn't help but smile. It reminded her of the connections she still had, the people who had been by her side during the hardest moments. It was a reminder that while the people who had hurt her had left, the ones who truly mattered had stayed. That night, Anna picked up the phone and called her friend. The conversation flowed easily, like no time had passed at all. They laughed, shared stories, and Anna felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging that she had missed. It was then that she realized just how much she had gained. She had rebuilt her support system. The people who loved her for who she was, not for who she was with or what she could give them, were the ones who had never wavered. They were the ones who mattered. And Anna understood that those were the relationships that would carry her forward. As the weeks passed, Anna continued to heal. She spent more time focusing on her career, her passions, and the small joys in life. She had learned to appreciate the simple moments, walking in the park, sipping coffee in the morning, or even just sitting in silence with a good book. The constant rush and pressure she once felt from her relationships had melted away, and for the first time in a long while, Anna felt free. Her job had become a source of satisfaction again, a place where her talents were recognized and valued. It wasn't just a paycheck, it was a part of her self-worth, a place where she could shine. She had realized that her identity wasn't tied to anyone else, it was hers to define. And with that realization came a deep internal peace. Her past, though painful, had shaped her into the woman she was now, and she was proud of her strength. She wasn't perfect, but she had learned to love herself, flaws and all. And that was more than enough. Anna stood at the edge of a small pier, the water gently lapping against the posts beneath her. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt right. The air was crisp, and the sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. As she gazed out over the water, Anna reflected on how far she had come. She had once believed that the end of her relationship with Daniel would define her life forever. But now, standing here, she realized it had been only the beginning of her true self-discovery. She had come to understand that the things that once seemed like insurmountable obstacles were merely stepping stones. Life would always have its challenges, but Anna knew that she could face them, just as she had faced everything else. The pain had shaped her, yes, but it had also made her stronger, more resilient. And now, she stood on her own, free to pursue whatever path she chose. There was no need to rush. The future would unfold as it should, and she would be ready for it. Anna stood on the platform, waiting for the train to arrive. She was heading to a new city, a new chapter of her life that she had decided to start on her own. The decision had been hers, and it felt like the final step in her journey of healing and self-empowerment. As she stood there, she thought about everything that had led to this moment, the betrayals, the heartache, the struggles, and how they had all brought her here. She wasn't the same woman she had been when this journey began, and she was proud of who she had become. The train's whistle echoed in the distance, signaling its arrival, but Anna didn't feel rushed. She had learned that it was okay to take her time, to move at her own pace. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. As the train pulled up, Anna stepped forward, a confident smile on her face. She was ready to embrace whatever came next. This was her moment, and she was finally free.